guys, welcome to the channel. Nigel here from Nigel's Modelling Bench, and we've got part 9 of this Roden C-141 build. And if you haven't seen any of the builds yet, get back and have a look. There's some interesting stuff on there, especially for beginners. I've tried to cover some of the sort of basic stuff for the basic build that this model is. It's been a bit slower than I intended, first of all, because I've been busy doing some other bits and pieces around the house and stuff, and another build as well, which I'm also filming. So let's get this one done. Right, so you can see here, basically the model has basically now had a coat all over of XF69 NATO black, and this was suggested by one of my original followers, James Mower. And what he suggested is, rather than doing the pre-shading with the, you know, going around the panel lines and stuff with the black and then painting it grey, do this, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go in between the panels and pick it out with some white paint. But before we do that, we need to obviously rub it down and polish it and make sure everything's nice and smooth. It's not bad. I had to do some polishing on the plastic, but it's not bad at all. You can hear it's quite rough. Well, it's not rough, it's matte, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use like a 2,500 grit sanding stick and just very gently go over it, just to sort of flatten it back, and it makes it a lot smoother. Obviously I don't want to rub the paint off, I just want to basically sort of finish what's there. Okay, and that gives me a nice smooth finish with which to do the next step on. And the next step will be, and these sponge pads, they come from premiumhobbies.co.uk. This is the 2,500 grit Infini modelling sponge. They are absolutely awesome. I'm really impressed with them, and I know that Ed from Premium Hobbies has been in touch, and he said a lot of you have ordered them and mentioned my name, so thanks very much, guys. I'm kind of hoping that Ed may respond by sending some more stuff for review, because getting stuff for review is always cool. So that's what we're going to do all over, is just basically go over and just rub it down and basically just polish, not polish, just smooth what is already there without rubbing it all off. The other thing I need to do is fit these engines. I forgot to do that. Now I'm painting the engines off of the model, because basically if you think about when the engine is fitted, getting into there could prove quite difficult. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to do this stage, the black, then I'm going to do the work to highlight and everything, then I'll spray the engines grey on this area here. Okay, and I know then that's done, and then what I can do is fit the engines and finish painting the whole thing. Something to be aware of, especially if you use Tamiya paint, if you find yourself having to get into tight spots, like in here for example, what you'll often find, as you go in there with the airbrush, the air goes in, the paint goes in, and the air blasts out, and you end up with a kind of dusty finish on the surface. Two ways around that: pull back, lower air pressure, pull back, thinner paint, and if you do find you get it, I mean, one of the particular areas is like on an F4 Phantom, where you've got the intakes on the sides and you've got the gap down the side. You'll often get it down in there, and what I found is the best way to do it is come in with some neat Mr. Colour Leveling Thinners, neat, and just spray it on there and leave it. Don't touch it, don't let it run, just spray it on there, and it will basically destroy that dusty surface and just break it down. But you need to do it before it gets a chance to dry. So just continue with rubbing this wing here. Now I want to fit these engines. Now I'd forgotten to do this before I actually painted it black, which I should have done, and I remember they're quite a tight fit. So we can see here that one doesn't really want to go in. So again, what I'm going to do with this is the Infini Matador sander. Going to go in with this one and just sand away like so, just to remove the paint and a touch of plastic. And you see I've got these tabs on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to number them, because they're probably all going to be slightly different, and what I want to do is fit beautifully so I don't have to mess around with fillers and Mr. Surfacer and stuff. And there we go, that fits in there lovely. Okay, so yeah, that fits in there really, really nice. In fact, I'll just take a touch more off. There we go. Now basically what I can do with that is just hold that in place, dab of extra thin in there, and that'll be it, job done. So that one is number 4. So we can number that number 4. So I'll go on and do the others the same, and then I'll come back. Okay, that's all done now. So we're all sanded down. As I say, I used the 2500 grit in there. I used the 400 grit Matador sander for getting the engines to fit, and that was basically just a case of rubbing down the sides of the pylons like so. Not sure if it's just my kit. If you are building this, beware. Number 1 position took a lot of sanding to get it to fit. Now if you remember, I did have some trouble when I built the wings, and you can see here this one I had to cut it away. So yeah, basically I sanded a lot off of this one to get it to fit in there nice and snug. So worth remembering, and it is still quite a tight fit. So I mean, that would actually fit in there without any glue. So I did have to use a skinny stick to get in there, just to get underneath this under wing area and around these pylons, or around the undercarriage bay, should I say. In fact, that needs a little bit more in there, just to flatten it back. And then what I've done, I've gone around with a stiff brush and rubbed all the dust and stuff out of the panel lines and everything. So so now we're ready to move to the next stage. Now, just want to discuss something here. You've got these walkway lines on here, which are provided as decals. Okay, you can see they're a dark grey. They're about 0.85 millimeters wide. I was thinking I would actually mask these, because getting these decals to go dead straight is often quite difficult. So it's what I would normally do is paint the area dark grey, well, it's already dark grey, and then I would just come along with masking tape, mask it off, and leave it till the complete finished model, and then take that off, well, until the final coat of grey goes on. Take that off, and then you've got these painted on lines rather than decals. That's all well and good, but the issue is when you get to areas like this here, where it sort of comes along, tapers out, and then you've got to step around here, you've got these little 2 bits here. So what I'll do is I'll give it a go with the decals. If it all goes pear-shaped, it's not the end of the world. We can mask it the other way around and then paint them on. But I'm sure they'll be absolutely fine. So that's just a little tip. If it's something simpler, or more simple, should I say, like I'm not sure, I think the A400 is fairly simple. You would definitely mask that. It's just rectangles, I think, on that one. So so there we go. So they're all rubbed down. Just did a little bit, went a bit too far there. I had a little seam showing back through, so decided to rub that away, but that's not a problem. This is all about, what I'm trying to do now is, rather than just have it a grey piece of plastic, I want it to look well used, a bit worn, you know, like it's been in the sun and the rain and everything, and it's going to be a bit dirty. So let's take you on to the next step. Okay, so now we come to the fun bit, and this is basically where I'm going to lighten everything down, and what I'm going to do is just shade in between all the panels and basically give it that kind of, I don't know, motley effect. If you ever watch Andy's Hobby Headquarters, he always does this, XF69 and then a coat of white afterwards. I'm doing basically the same thing. I think it's got a little, I haven't watched any of Andy's videos for a while, but it's got a little bit of a twist. I thin it down and get it really thin and spray it at light air pressure and that and go. So I've got a little mixing cup here. I would normally mix in the airbrushes, you know, but I want to see just how thick the paint is before it goes in. I'm going to use Tamiya X28 thinners purely because it doesn't smell as bad and I'm not in the booth and you want to see what I'm doing. I've got a cheap old brush here, which is a brand new Revell brush. I've got something on my glasses there. And I've got my pot of, or one of my pots of XF2 Tamiya, which is there, flat white, and oh, that's pretty empty. There's hardly anything in there. So I'd be tempted, no I won't, I will use the mixing pot. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pour some paint into my little mixing pot. Just like so, nothing too much. Okay, and then we can, there's one to look out for, guys. I'm using that brush to stir the paint on the end, and it's actually attacked the paint that's on the brush, so there's one to be aware of. Cheap Revell, these are they came in a packet. I just found them, I was just looking for an old brush, and I just found this packet of them. So yeah, see what they're like. I expect half the hairs will come out. So I've got the paint in there now, and I want to make a really thin mix. So just put some thinners in there. That's probably 50-50, and that's going to be about 75-25. There we go. So we'll see how that looks. What you can do is pull the paint up the side of the pot and see how thick it is. Now that's still a little too thick for what I want, so I'm just going to get some more thinners. There we go, I'm happy with that. That's kind of, oh my god, look at all those bristles coming out. Oh dear. Shan't be using that again. Goodbye. So there we go. So I'm tempted now to use a pipette and transfer this into another tub. Because I can see a bristle stuck to the side there. Word of warning for you guys, these cheap rubbish brushes you buy in packs, you know, they're great for weathering and stuff if you want to use them for your oils or whatever, but I mean, all I did there was stirred that, and you saw that, what, 6 or 7 bristles came out straight away. So there we go. So I've got that mixed up now, and that's ready to go. So I've got the airbrush running at about 12-14 psi, so I can just pour some of this in there like so, and I can just check my flow, and you can see I've got my old base here, so put that out the way so it doesn't get knocked over. And then what we'll do is we'll start with these undercarriage doors. And what I can do is just come along. Now these are never going to be seen anyway. I just come along and just shade in the middle of the panel and leave the edges like that, and what you'll find is as you go it will lighten back anyway. Okay, there's ejector pin marks in there, as I say. They bolt up underneath the aircraft, so you're not going to see them anyway. So what you want to avoid is doing stuff like this. You don't want to come in and go mad and get it too light, like that. Okay, what you want to do is just, like I say, keep it supple and build it up. And as it dries back, you will see that it fades away. So now these doors here will be seen, so we need to be a little bit more careful with these. And this is, like I say, it's just an artistic effect to get that kind of used, worn look and give the whole thing some depth. Heavy there. This is why having the thin paint is such a necessity, because what you don't want to do is start just building up. You're not trying to paint it white. You're just trying to give it a contrasting base, so when the grey goes over the top, it shows through. And again, when we spray the grey, we'll thin that right out. go. So you can see there, I'll show you that closer. So you can see that the kind of effect we're after is just getting a lighter highlight in the centre of the panel and letting the outside stay grey. So we'll do a bit on the aircraft itself, and then I'll do the rest off camera. So make sure your arms are steady. You don't want to be, you know, you don't want to be like trying to do this. You want to be nice and steady, and basically it's good to steady your hand. If you can get the aircraft in a position where it's comfortable, I'm just going to go along the edge of there, like so. Right, now you can see the kind of effect there we've got. Now we've also got a bit of a mold effect. Now there is a technique called black basing. I'm not going to talk about it now because I'll go into it in depth because there's loads of videos on it. But black basing is basically where you come along and you kind of, what you would do is you come along and you mottle in like so, and you leave the other panel showing through. I'm not going to do it on one bit of this because it'll look odd. But what I did notice there is when I was doing that, it decided that it was going to start rocking about. So put some sanding sticks under there so it stays still. Make sure you're still in shot, and then we can come along. That was actually a very good idea that James had, because what this does, it's the same kind of thing as doing panel lining, but it's a lot softer, it's a lot more subtle. You can see there that basically we've got a very, very soft blend between the panels rather than a harsh kind of panel line. It's just an effect. You'll see what I mean when we spray the grey. Now here I've got a problem because I need to hold the model, so I'm going to basically put it down on its wing, get a cloth so it grips and doesn't slide away under me, and then I'm just going to have to see if you just keep the paint going and just move around. One of the problems with stop starting is you'll often get spatter. Okay. There we go, we can come underneath there. And the reason for the lower air pressure is it stops it going everywhere. If you use higher pressure, it kind of blows it all around. And what you can do, if you want to, you can come in really close and really, really highlight a certain area, like so. There we go. I'm sorry if it looks a bit dark today, guys. The weather outside is abysmal and there is no daylight coming through the window at all. Normally we've got some daylight coming through from this side. Okay. Turn it over. And you can also see that it's nothing technical, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you're better having it a bit random. You're not trying to make a checkerboard, you're just trying to, like my American came out then, you hear that? I said checkerboard. You're not trying to make a drafts board, you're just trying to give it some depth. Okay, so you can see there, basically that's what we're doing. Okay, so I'll get the rest done and then I'll come back. Right then, there we go, and we're looking good. We've got the whole thing now has all been done, and you can see it's a bit more subtle underneath than on the top because obviously the sun would have bleached the top more than the bottom. Let that dry now for a couple of hours, and then I'll probably just go over it, I don't know, with an 8000 grit or something, just to take any nibs off or anything that's there. Although it does actually feel very smooth. I will be honest. I worked from the back forward. I got to about here and I started having problems. I noticed that the paint was kind of separating from the Tamiya thinners, so I drained that out and I went back to my Mr. Hobby leveling thinners and had no problems at all after that. I also went over the bits where I rubbed through, where the plastic was showing through. It stuck out like a sore thumb, so I went over those bits again with the XF69 and then went over with the pre-shading again. So we can see we've got the engines there all done, all ready to go. Here doors, obviously you've seen those. So there we go. So yeah, it's you know, it's a lot more subtle. You can see that if I did the grey and then did the panel line shading, it would be a lot sharper on the panel line shading. So what I've done is kind of, you know, this, as James suggested, is giving me a far more subtle approach. I've gone a little heavy down here, as you can see. I may have to just come in with some grey there, or I'll just go very, very light with the grey in that area, because I really want this to just basically just show through. I don't want it to look at all like it does now. Once it's got the grey paint on it, I think you'll be quite surprised how it actually comes out. Right then guys, welcome back. Here we are now. It's Saturday the 19th of October 2019 already. So if you remember, we did the kind of pre-shading on the aircraft, and then I've got the engines and the gear bay doors here. My chosen colour for this is going to be Tamiya XF53. XF54 is a fairly common colour, is just a touch darker. So if you haven't got 53, you've got 54, then you know you'll be fine with that. So I'll give that a good shake, and then what I'm going to do is, just to make sure, I'm going to get my little badger stirrer here and get that in there and give it a good stir. It's always worth remembering with these badger stirrers, if you lift it out slowly, okay, and then let the end come out of the paint at the top, and then you won't have much paint on there at all. Okay, otherwise if you just turn it off in there and take it out, you'll end up with a great mountain of paint left on the stirrer. But if you keep it running while you lift it out of the paint, then it centrifuges off. Don't just lift it out because you'll spray paint everywhere. But there we go. So that's that cleaned up. Alright, so that can go. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a premix again, which is something I don't often do. So I'm just going to take some of this paint in there. That should do me. Now I'm using Mr. Colour leveling thinner, so I can always put this back in the pot if I have to. I don't tend to generally brush paint with Tamiya paints anyway, so I always just pour it back in, and you know, you end up with an airbrushable paint anyway. So I'm going to thin this pretty heavily because I want it to be a very light dust coat, so I can get the effects coming through. So I think that's about, give that a stir, see what it's like. Yeah, it's about the consistency of milk, so it's It's about 70% thinners, 30% paint. I'm not a drop counter, I don't do that. So give that a stir. So that's all good to go, and then we'll wipe our stirrer off, which also happens to be an engine. And then we'll get this in the airbrush. So you see I've got a piece of paper towel here, and I'm not going to do too much on here because obviously I'm using Mr. Colour leveling thinners and it stinks, and I don't want to stink the house out. So I'm just going to check my flow. Absolutely fine. And then I think we'll start with these gear bay doors. So what I'll do is I'm just going to very, very lightly paint this on so that I see my effects coming through. And you can see it's literally going on so thin. And now you can see that effect we did with the white is now extremely subtle. Now if I get this close up to the camera, you should be able to see what I mean. You can just see the white coming through. Now if we leave that for 5 minutes, you'll probably find it'll become a lot more defined. Now obviously on these engines the white is very thin, so I've got to go very careful. I could actually go over with white again and make it a bit more defined, but I don't want it to be that definite. So I'm just going to lightly spray the engine all over, and let's see what it looks like. And we can see there that the actual effect is coming through. So do the same again, start on the bottom, come up over the top, and I'm literally just dusting this on. Airbrush is at about 20 psi. And the whole secret of this, like anything with this kind of thing, with these effects, it's not what you put on, it's what you don't put on that matters. Obviously if you just go blasting in there with grey paint, you'll lose the effect completely, and if you don't put enough on, the effect will be too defined. Now I don't want it to look like a patchwork quilt, I want it to just look like a sort of weathered aircraft. Oops. Okay, and now we can see, and this is real time, after only a few minutes you can see that the white on these gear doors here has become a lot more defined. I'm not going to worry about it because you're not going to see them anyway, because they go flat up under the bottom. But the white on there, you can see it's given it that kind of, it's almost like the light is on it. It's not, it's the white paint. So that's the kind of effect we're after. So I can put those there and then take another look at these engines, and you can see the effect on there. We've got this sort of dirty look, this shaded look, and that will become more prominent as the paint dries because the Mr. Colour leveling thinners will bite in. So I've now got the aircraft here on its back, got it on a paper towel on a Tamiya turntable, almost knocked that paint over then. So what I'm going to do first is get into this area in here, and then I can put it down and I don't have to hold it. So we got the turntable out of the way, and what I'm going to do, just check my flow again. I'm just going to come in here and lightly paint the area that I'm not going to be able to get to. If you remember what I said before, you've got to be careful of this dry paint effect, because you're in an area that the air is going in and coming out, and then the paint will want to just sit around there and fall, so it sort of dries before it gets on the surface. So it kind of sticks to the surface as a micro ball, if you like. So you can see there we've got that area in there done. And we'll do the same on here. Again, just literally dusting it on. And we can see the shading effect is showing through. Okay, so that's going to do me for there. Now I just want to make sure I get the top top of those undercarriage pods so that I don't have to come back to this area again. And there we go. That's those areas done. And I may have gone a bit too much of the grey paint there. I think I've lost some of the shading effect, but it'll probably come back. Whoops. So now what I'm going to do is the lower sides of the wings. I'm going to start from the inside and work it out. Run out of paint, so just get some more. You can really see the effect now because we're on a large area. And if you notice, I'm spraying in the direction of travel so that any sort of area where it's a bit thicker or a bit thinner, the actual line will be that way. If I spray it this way and I end up with thick and thin patches, then it will look odd. But as it is now, you can see here you've got some lines appearing. So just going to come back. Paint that again. There we go. Now I can move on to the other wing. Probably off camera there. Right, and you can see that the actual pre-shaded effect is showing through. So give it another quick blast. There we go, and I'm just going to run along the leading edge just to make sure that's all covered. So we go, you can see the underside of the wings, and there you can see the effect that we're looking for. So I'll do the underside of the tailplane. And then the other side. Just like so. You can watch it coming back before your very eyes. So just do it again. And if it's your first time, you might want to practice on an older model or something, or practice on a piece of card, a plastic card. As I say, if you mess this up now, if you go too heavy, you've got to start all over again. Put a bit more on here. As I say, what I'm after is an effect. I don't want to be able to see the effect too heavily. Okay, going to drop more paint. I must say I don't normally do this, but it does make life a lot easier having a paint pre-mixed. There we go. And then, as we can see on that tailplane, it's come back. So just lightly dust over that again. There we go. And I think now, while I'm upside down, I'll do the fin as well. So we can come in. Like so. Turn it around. Let's have two. Give this one the same. There we go. And now, what I want to do now is down the bottom. Now, one of the problems with this being a one colour aircraft is obviously if we had like a silver underneath or a grey underneath, we'd mask this now, paint the underneath, unmask it, and then paint the top. Now, The problem I've got with this now is I've got to paint the bottom, let it dry so I can stand it on its bottom, and then be able to blend the paint. So what I'm going to do is just a minimal amount underneath the front, so underneath the fuselage I mean, not the front. So I'm just going to come on down the centre here. As I say, I'm still keeping the airbrush in the same direction as travel. I'll do the bottom of these gear pods. Oops. What I'm going to do there is just blend in up to those gear pods and then let the paint thin out as it comes around the side, and then what I can do is blend that in when I do the top. Okay, let's do the back end. Out of paint again. So what I'll do is I'm going to keep going until this paint's finished, or until I've done the bottom side, and then we'll call that a day for this video, because I want to get one out there, because I haven't got videos out for you guys lately. Oops. Right, now you can see here we've got some heavy banding there, so I'm just going to paint in that area, and the same here. And there we go. Now doing this now, I'm tempted to have a go at that Antonov because it's white. Now, if I was to do it in the Russian military, I've got a good excuse to make it look a bit used and worn, and it'd be very interesting to do this on a white aircraft. That would be fun. And there we go. Right, so we can see there we've got a bit of a heavy dark area there, so I'm just going to gently blend in again there. Give the fin a quick revisit. There we go. There we are. We can see we've got everything blended in, and we can just see that subtle darkness showing through. Alright, we'll come back to that in a second. I'm just going to revisit these engines. We can see now that it's a lot more defined as the paint has dried. It's starting to get a bit smelly in here now. I'll have to get the window open. My trouble is I can't have the window open while I'm filming, because as soon as a person walks past the house, or another dog, or a hedgehog breathes or sneezes, then my dog will bark. And there we go. And again, on these undercarriage doors now you can see the effect has become more prominent. There we go. So there we are. That I'm very happy with. Yeah, I couldn't be happier with that. So there we go, guys. We'll call that a day for part 9, I think this has been. And I hope you've learnt something from it. Basically, as I say, James Mower suggested I do this. Thank you, James. And it's something I've used before. I can't remember what I've done it on, but I know I've used it before, and it does work very, very well. The secret is to think about the top colour As I say, if this was going to be like a very, very light grey, then you may use something like this, and then use the white, and then use the light grey. Subtlety is key. You can see, you know, we've all seen people with their pre-shading, and the aircraft looks like, you know, we've seen it done well, and it looks great. But then people say it's not actually correct. Well, you know, it's a plastic model. But you can see that it's a lot more subtle. Like you can see this area here, it's a lot more subtle than having the black pre-shading showing through. Okay, so we'll leave that to go dry overnight. Now that might all go bang back again, and it'll look all, you know, like a zebra. We don't want that. We want it to be subtle. Now I am just going to put some more on there because that is not looking so subtle. You can see a little bit. This is literally what's left in the airbrush after I poured it out. So you can see that, you know, it's such a tiny amount of paint I'm putting on. Something there. We're out of paint now. So there we are. We'll leave that overnight. And that, my friends, is that. So we can take another look at these engines. You can see we've got the very, very subtle shaded effect showing through there. Very, very subtle indeed. But as I say, as it dries, it will become more prominent. Alright, and they're going to look lovely sat in there. So we'll glue them on next, I think. In fact, no, I'll do the top of the wings because I'll get overspray on them. Well, maybe I will glue them on, and then if I need to do any remedial work, I can. So there we go, guys. I'm sorry it's been such a long time since I got this video out last time, but I have been playing with the fuselage, as you know, to get rid of seam lines and stuff, and it's been quite a nightmare. In the next build I do, I think what I'll do is I'll show you using super glue and talcum powder as a filler, and that way you can rub it down and it doesn't tend to shrink back. So thanks for watching this. As I say, it's Saturday now. This is going to go out now. I'm going to edit this now and get it up and go and have a pint. So by the time you watch this, I'll be having a pint. So I'll see you later. Thanks for watching, and the next video will be finishing off this paint job and then giving it all a clear coat.